Welcome to the Serial Entrepreneur Club, where we try to figure out what it is that serial entrepreneurs do over and over again to start, scale, exit, and repeat. In every business, you need people, money, you need a good story, and you need systems to scale. Today, we're talking about people. How do we hire great people for your audience? We want you on stage. Today, we're doing an open mic session. If you've got a tip or a trick or something like that, please put up your hand and come on stage. This is about all of us talking about these challenges together and figuring out that secret sauce, what it is that makes a business successful.
So we're going to talk about hiring the right people for your startup. If you want to share some information or ask a question, raise your hand and Rachel will start bringing you on stage. I'll just start by telling a little story, Colin, and say that hiring is probably one of the biggest challenges a startup to face. And I learned this lesson hard way a number of years ago when I co-founded a company called barpoint.com. And we were in an unusual situation because we went public through a reverse merger and raised $7 million with just my co-founder and myself. So we were two employees. We had plenty of money in the bank. We were a publicly traded company, and we had to start building our team. And I thought very naively, I have all this money in the bank. This is going to be easy. We just got to throw money at people and start hiring. The first person we hired was a bookkeeper because we had money in the bank and we needed to keep track of our finances. Then we needed to hire a CTO, a technologist, because we were a technology company. And we had our proof of concept done by a contractor, but now we wanted to bring our technology in-house. And I went ahead and we met this guy through a shoe store. Literally, it was like the boyfriend of someone who was selling shoes to my partner. But on paper, he looked great. We negotiated a deal. We interviewed him. We hired him. He was going to start in 2 weeks. And I said to myself, boy, this is easy. Hiring people is no problem. So sure enough, I had no other backup plan, no other resumes. I threw everything out. I had him. He was starting in 2 weeks. And the night before he was supposed to start work, Sunday night, he calls me up at 10 p.m. and says, Jeff, about the job, my employer gave me a better offer. And basically, I'm not going to come work for you. So I was completely left with my pants around my ankle, as the saying goes. I was totally unprepared. All the plans I had made went out the window. And I said to myself, oh my gosh, hiring is hard. And instead of hiring a technologist, the next person we hired was a recruiter. We brought a recruiter in-house, and she came on to head up our recruiting in-house, head up our HR. Her name was Anita Garnett. She was terrific. And she hand by hand, one by one, built that company from 4 people to 81 people. And she had her hands on every one of those hirings. And that was the smartest move I ever made as an entrepreneur after learning a very hard lesson. So that's my story about hiring. It's hard. You need to have the right people helping you hire, whether it's in-house or out-house. Colin?
Yeah, I just wanted to share 5 little hacks or tips that I have here from my experience with all the startups we've launched over the last 25 years. The first thing I would do is think of somebody who in your organization who's already built a startup before. Jack Welch uses the line hire people with runway. So if you want to grow your company to $10 million, hire someone who's already launched a startup that grew to $10 million. The second is when you do hire the employee, try to be very direct with them, their goals that you are setting for your startup. And you can actually put that right in the offer letter. In the next 90 days, you'll deliver X number of leads, X number of sales, et cetera, et cetera. The next thing I do is I profile everyone. And I've talked about the DISC profiling method here on the show a number of times. There is also the Myers-Briggs, but in the case of the DISC profiling method, you really do want to figure out the profile of the individual. If you're hiring a sales manager, you're going to want someone to be dominant and influential. You're hiring a chief operating officer, you're going to want someone to be dominant. And you're hiring a programmer, you're going to want someone to be analytical and stable. So really hiring, doing a profiling and hiring based on a profile, I think is probably the most important thing. The next I will say is you want DIY employees. This is a startup. This is chaos. And there's a lot of multitasking. There's a lot of things that these employees need to do in order for your startup to succeed. And last thing I'll say is Rolodex. Hire if you can hire someone from Rolodex. I remember when we were at Hostopia, we would hire people from our competitors. We literally won the market. We won the industry by we completely dominated it. And one of the ways we did that was hire our competitors' top salespeople. So there's a few tips there, Jeff. And let's make this open mic. Let's get everybody on stage who wants to share some of their tips.
Yep, we've got a bunch of people on stage already, so we'll start going around. Michele, did you have a story or a tip you want to share about hiring the right people?
Yeah, really, it's an individualist thing. And I think it depends a lot on what kind of company you're in, what stage you're in, but really also understanding the type of people, the skill sets that you need. Before this show, I just wrote down a few things, and then I'm going to share with you what the how I've evolved, because we're all evolving, how I've evolved as a hiring manager. So, what's really important for me, obviously, and I think it is for everyone, is what are their hard skills, right? If they're a programmer, what is their skill set in terms of whatever language, etc. If they're a salesperson, are they a closer or an opener? If they're account manager, what are the hard skills that you would grade them on that are very quantitative? And then there's the qualitative, the soft skills. Like you could have the smartest, most brilliant programmer, but if they refuse, obviously, to work with anyone, you know what? That doesn't really help anyone. So, soft skills, something that we talked a lot about here in the past. And different soft skills work for different job descriptions. A salesperson, obviously, you want someone who's really good at network and communication. Maybe you don't care how analytical they are, it just depends on your company. And then something I think is really important is their staying power. It costs a lot of money, it is a lot of effort of executives and other folks to hire people. So, really, are they going to stay? And are they going to grow with the company? That's something that I feel is extremely important. And it oftentimes gives you weight in terms of maybe you hire somebody that has less hard skills or at a different level that you know that you can develop. It's time well spent. And last but not least, I'll just share something that I have moved towards lately in a couple of the companies that I'm working with managing people is I think sometimes it behooves you to bring people on and them work with you on a project, have them interact with the team, have them interact with customers. There's nothing like being real time on the ground to really be able to assess if it's a good fit. And I don't mean just a good fit for you, but a good fit for them too. Because in the long run, if they're not going to stay and grow with the company, then you're better off and you're doing them a favor to look other in another direction. So my name's Michele, thank you, and that's my tips for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Michele. All good advice. And I think one of the key things Michele mentioned there is there aren't necessarily the same rules across the board for every role. You want to get the right person in the right seat on the bus, as Jim Collins would say. But at the same time, you want to also make sure that everyone fits the company culture. So even if you're looking for different skills in different positions, everyone across the board needs to be a good fit because people want to work with people that they get along with and like working with, and the company culture is going to dictate a lot of that. Neil, welcome to the stage. Did you have a comment, question, story to share about hiring the right people? Neil, if you're there, oh, there you go.
Uh, okay, sorry. Yeah, I have had several startups. Started a company called King Coca Beverage Corporation. I think that was about 2007. We was officially when it became King Coca Beverage Corporation. It was a beverage corporation. The backstory was I was out in Asia doing some reforestation projects, and a friend of mine called me and he said, Coca-Cola is looking to launch a coconut water company, and they're looking for a company to buy. So this was so we spent the next 2 or 3 years wooing Coca-Cola, and eventually they bought a company called Zico out of Brazil. So Mark Rampolla, the guy who started
So
Zico,
Neil, we
yep,
want to try to keep it focus to today's topic, which is on hiring the
Yeah.
right people for your startup. So can you bring it to that topic, please?
Sure. I did not have the people. We missed out on what we realized was that we didn't have the right people, and our branding and positioning was bad. We looked at it, and then essentially about 2 or 3 years ago, we completely changed the business model. And I'm currently in the position where we have launched 6 or 7 different brands, and I'm looking to hire very specific brand managers or brand directors. So we're now in a position where I'm going through the process. I'm working with LinkedIn and we're in the process of looking specifically to hire brand directors. And we're finding a lot of people are coming and they're software developers and so forth. That's not where we are. We are a beverage company. We do formulated, all of our products are formulated with very secret formulations. So essentially, what I wanted to let anyone know on the panel, anyone listening to this, is if you're someone who is very good in brand development for beverage companies, we are a nutraceutical company fundamentally. So if it's a functional, we are in the specific space is functional beverages. We're looking for specific people. I'm going through the process, but I still haven't found the kind of talent I'm looking for. All I
Hopefully
have
the
to say.
show, Neil, hopefully the show today will really help you out with that. And I liked your point about LinkedIn. I just did that about a week ago. We were looking for a sales executive, and I looked at one of the companies that was our competitor, and I actually sent them a LinkedIn. Now, I didn't get a response. I don't think LinkedIn messaging is as effective as it used to be, but I do think using LinkedIn is a great tool. All right, we and then welcome welcome Rich to the stage as well. Thank you for coming. I know we asked you to come on yesterday, but we'll jump over to Sharon right now. We'll try to keep it in order.
Hey, Colin and Jeffrey. I loved Michelle's idea about hiring someone on a contract basis, and my to really be more to motivation. It's super important in any company, but more so in startups, I think, to know what the motivation behind someone who you are bringing into your organization is. Are they looking to come into your organization to help you build and grow, or are they looking to your organization to be a stepping stone? And are they going to churn and burn through the business? And then that creates a difficult position for you building a brand or building a company that has staying power. If people are looking to move through, it also creates a difficult situation for people coming in, because then they see that, and then that might not be your company culture, but it becomes your company culture sort of de facto by the fact that people are coming in, seeing an opportunity, and moving on as a result of that. So I think motivation is a super important metric for looking to hire people.
Thank you, Sharon. That's great advice and good to see you. And you'll notice the crossover here in Startup Club. One of the previous speakers has visited us for the name game previously, and here we are in the Serial Entrepreneur Club hour. Haley, welcome to the stage. What are your thoughts on hiring the right people for your startup?
Hello. I actually more came here for observation because I was interested, because I really wanted to make like a website so that I can format myself to possibly sell my art, and then include like treats with it if I can, like cookies,
O-
because I bake a lot. Like, I'm a diverse
Okay.
artist with a big portfolio, so
Well, Haley, that
hmm?
sounds great. So hopefully, if you're here to listen and learn, because the topic that we're discussing is hiring the right people, but there's lots of opportunities to talk more about your business in some other rooms on Startup Club. And we want to try to stay focused to the topic at hand today. So let's go to Rich. Welcome. Good to see you.
Hey, thanks, Jeffrey. Thanks, Colin, for inviting me to join you today. Glad I could take advantage of that. So, to the topic, hiring the right people. Some of the assessments that I like to use in that process. Number one is ascertaining the person's listening skills. you've got to be a good listener, and especially today. And their writing skills are paramount. And a lifelong learner is a person that is attractive to me in any role. And also giving them short assignments in the interview process and seeing if they complete those and to what degree do they complete them? Are they providing exhaustive feedback, or is it just superficial? They went to a website and they clipped a few things and they try to provide you that input. And as I mentioned yesterday, one of the things that I always have done in my career when I'm hiring is I always have a meal with the person, and typically not only a breakfast, lunch, but a dinner. And if they have a spouse, to invite them. And that's for a couple reasons. And one is to understand what their potential family culture is all about, and that perspective, and how they interact and interrelate to one another, and how they treat people during the course of the dinner, the servers and the staff that we might come in contact with.
Yeah, Rich, I was going to ask you a question about, have you ever tried situational hiring where you actually put them in a scenario and you see how they perform? Is that something you've ever done before? I've heard that that can increase your chances of success. That question was to you, Rich. Sorry.
Any capacity has to have desire and expectation.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
you
Rich, you were muted for the first part of what you were saying, so we only caught the tail end. You may want to repeat what you said.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, we hear you.
Okay, hiring the right people, basically listening skills, their writing skills, them being a lifelong learner is important to me. And also providing them a short assignment to, if you're inviting them back for a second or third interview, to give them an assignment and to see to what degree do they complete that? Do they complete that exhaustively, or do they complete that superficially? And I always have a meal with the person
yeah,
I'm going
we
to
did
hire.
catch the
Okay.
meal part, but I was just my
Did,
question was about situational. It sounds like you have used that before, and does that really increase the chances of success with when you do hire someone?
situational, I believe it does because it gives you a window into behavior, and that's what's critical to me.
Yeah, I think, Colin, the idea of giving tests for different positions, which is I think what you and Rich are talking to, obviously it depends on the position, but I know if you're hiring a coder or a programmer, a lot of times companies will give an actual programming test to see what their code looks like, and they have them do it almost live, so you know that they're not copy and pasting it from somewhere else, but actually creating it for you on the fly. And depending on the position, there are other like small assignments or tasks or projects that you can give someone to do, as you alluded to, that gives you a sense of the quality of their work, how they go about it. Do they get frustrated? Is it clear and easy to understand? So I think the more you can glean beforehand, the better, if it's appropriate. Peter, it's great to see you. Welcome, and I would love to hear your thoughts on the topic.
Hey guys, how are you? Michele, Colin, Jeff, thanks for having me. Pretty interesting discussion. I saw it come up and I thought, yeah, that's people are always the challenge in life and running any business. There's a couple things, comments I had here. Eons ago, some decades, I won't tell you how many, I used to hire tree planters. And I learned the first year I hired, I thought, okay, all these people, they're all athletic. They seem like good independent people. And so they all came out and they were a disaster. And I learned that I'm just going to hire people. When you hire people, you talk about culture of teams and the importance of it. Typically, they will like each other as well. So that's one point I would make on this. The other one is I always look for people that if they have the exact expertise, that's always great. But what's most important to me is really about their attitude and where they want to go. People with positive attitude and have a sort of a vision of where they want to go. And if that lines up, that's something I'm always looking for a position. The last thing I think I'd mention is, and I might have this wrong, but I remember reading, I think it was a Harvard Business Review article about the best performing teams, and it really stuck with me. I think you have it right. They had four character types that are the best performing teams in the study they did. First of all, you have the visionary. Well, this is typically the business leader driving forward, a bunch of crazy ideas, but really interesting stuff that people want to do. And then there's the driver on the team that's going to make sure that everybody's moving along, but really driving people to go. And you need that guy or woman. And then they had the pragmatist. So in a way, the Eeyore of the bunch, if you're Winnie the Pooh fans, who looks at what everybody's doing and saying that would be nice, but it's not really possible. And then there was another one that was really more related to just very clear project management, discipline, and detail. Now, I might have those slightly wrong, but they were more or less, I thought it made a lot of sense where you need different types of people to be able to perform quite well. And especially in software development, not everybody is the hotshot. You need to have those people that are the pragmatists, they're looking for errors, that just want really good quality, and really more the pragmatist of it. So those are 3 points. I hope that's of some value to people, but I always come back to, if I like someone and they have the attitude, we can train the expertise or the specific skill.
Great points and great suggestions, Peter. Absolutely, you have to like who you're working with. We spend way too much time together at work to be
Yeah,
surrounded by people that we can't get along with. I also like what you said about diversity of the team. And diversity is important in every meaning of the word, gender and race and otherwise, but also diversity in thinking is really important too in a team. And that's why in many businesses, even beyond hiring, having, cross-functional teams to work on projects so that things don't get siloed is very important. So you really want to have that diversity. You don't want to hire people that are just clones of yourself and that are going to have the same thinking that you have, because you're not going to progress and you're not going to get differing points of
yeah,
opinion and points of view. So great points, Peter.
great. Thanks, guys. Love your show.
Thank you, Peter, and stick around. And anyone who's on the stage and listening, if you have a comment or you want to chime in, just flash your mic. Let's go to Roland next. Roland, what are your thoughts on hiring the right people for your startup?
Hello, Jeffrey. Thank you, Rachel, for inviting me on stage. Thank you, Jeffrey and Colin, for allowing me to share your space. Quick intro, just to give some context. So I'm Roland De Silva, based in London. And what I do is I work with both corporates and startups, helping them with things like strategy, business planning, as well as organizational design and culture, because the two are closely linked, if not intertwined. And when I answer this question, I'm coming at it from a perspective of context, purpose, and reasons. So any business is, including a not for profit business, is there to fulfill an objective. It's not there to take on cost. So it is hiring someone that is going to enable the fulfillment of that purpose. With the hiring of that person comes a responsibility on the company side to look after its different stakeholders, employees included. And then there are the reasons why you hire people that, what would be the right word here, that are closely aligned with your values. And then you get into the personal side. Personally, I would be looking at people that are easy to work with, that have a diversity of experience and background, and that are future oriented. You don't want people that are great in hindsight but are not able to look into the future. We're living in a society that's changing very rapidly, and with that ability to come to look into the future, you have to have the humility to always be willing to learn. Status quo doesn't work moving forward. And that's my 2 cents. Back to you, Jeffrey.
Thank you, Roland. Those are all good thoughts. Yeah, I think what you said relates a little bit to something that Colin mentioned earlier. You mentioned having that goal, that purpose in mind for the company. And so you really want to understand how the roles you're hiring for are going to contribute to that purpose. So as Colin said earlier, you need to know what's expected of the people you're hiring even before you hire them, because then they're going to know what's expected of them, and you're also going to know that what you're collectively doing is going to move the company forward along the goals and strategy the company has. So good points, Roland. Thank you. Veronica, welcome. What are your thoughts on hiring the right people?
Hi, Jeffrey. Thank you so much. And I really love what Roland said as well as what you said. And it is the Harvard Business Review that talks about this. I have about 25 years of experience in both corporate HR leading global teams. And I currently own my own staffing firm. What I do is I help companies that are growing find the talent they need. I do think that one of the key things that people really forget about when they're looking for the right talent is really understanding the skills they need. Sometimes, so having a really clear understanding of the skills that are necessary for the person to be successful is probably one of the first things you need to look at when you're looking for talent for your organization. But I agree. You want to find somebody who has high EQ. You want to find somebody who has shared culture and values as far as the company, as well as a diversity of thinking as well. You guys mentioned earlier something about skills-based testing. I think that depending on the role, and I agree with what you said about technology roles and programmers, they're fully aware that they're going to be tested on their technical skills. They're aware of the tests. They know which tests they're going to have to take. I think some of the challenges with the current job market is it is a huge candidate market right now. And depending on the roles, I've had candidates just flat out say, hey, I will not work for free, so they won't as part of the process. And 9 times out of 10, we exit them out of the process. But you're finding more candidates are feeling comfortable pushing back because they just have multiple offers with client and with companies at this time. As far as finding talent, I heard you guys mention LinkedIn. I love LinkedIn. I think it's still the number one source. You can do something, especially if you're a small company, you guys can get something like LinkedIn Recruiter to send in-mails. And I really like the ability, since you're your own company, you can really post your jobs on Indeed for free, likely on Glassdoor for free as well. And you should get some pretty good responses. But one of the things you always want to consider when you're inboxing somebody, just so you guys know, because I heard somebody say they're not getting a lot of responses, is it always works better when you inbox them and say, hey, I'm working on this role. Who do you know? And if they're really interested, 9 times out of 10, they're going to say, hey, me. Or if they're not interested, what they'll think to do, and this is just a recruiter trick, not trick, but trick of the trade, is they'll start referring people to you because they're thinking about their friends who might be interested in a role or their colleagues. So thank you.
Great.
It's interesting that we actually got Jeffrey Moore on this show, Jeffrey Moore Inside the Tornado, Crossing the Chasm. And we got him on the show through LinkedIn. So I do agree. It's still a very effective service. You triggered something else there too around the stress and the challenges that startups today have to go through in order to hire people because there is such a shortage of labor and the prices, the wages are rising significantly. And it's more and more difficult for that startup to attract the qualified candidates. And I sometimes use this phrase, I think I've used it before, pay your people with love, freedom, and ownership. And what do I mean by that? When I say love, total recognition. These are people who could be working for double the salary at a Fortune 500 company, yet they've decided to work for your startup. Really, it's all about appreciation and letting them know how much you do appreciate them. Freedom, I think that's become more popular now with the COVID, the pandemic, because that's really about flexibility. And it doesn't matter. We have at Startup Club, we have about 5 employees. We have somebody in India. We have somebody who works in Chicago. She was down here in Fort Lauderdale. She moved up to Chicago. We have different people all over the place. We let them bring their kids to work. We let them bring their dogs to work. It doesn't matter. We'll try to be as accommodating as possible. And then ownership. One thing I've done in all my companies is try to ensure that everyone has a piece of the company. And as the company starts to grow and is successful, everyone benefits from that hard work as well. I know there are structures like option plans, which I do like to use, but also if it gets a little complicated, you can offer some type of profit sharing plans as well. So there's just some ideas to try to make your startup a little bit more desirable in such a tough market.
Yeah, good suggestions, Colin. And I've seen you in action on pretty much everything you talked about there. Veronica, since you're in the business, you made me think of something. Given the state of the current market, is there really value to posting jobs anymore, or is that kind of a waste of time? And is it really more important to be proactively reaching out through LinkedIn, through your network, using employees? I know many companies have instituted bounty programs where if employees can refer someone for an open position, they can get rewarded in some way, because if you're hiring great people, know great people. What are your thoughts on that, Veronica? Is it still worth it to post jobs?
Yes, I do think so, because either way it goes, even I think the number one source for me has always been referrals, whether they're employee referrals or external referrals. I always ask for referrals, no matter who I'm talking to. So I think, but you want to have somewhere where they can go and look at the job rather quickly, since most people are searching for jobs on their cell phones. So the purpose of posting is to be able to send a little link, even if you do it for free, and say, hey, here's the job right here if you want to look at the job description. Because the first thing they're going to ask you when you send an email, where's the job description? Now you can include an attachment, but remember they're on their cell phone, so they have to click on the attachment and open it. If you have it posted somewhere, even on a free site, it makes it much easier. And Indeed really does. People are still, heavily looking for jobs, and there are people looking for jobs who've been at companies who wouldn't have considered prior to COVID. And I think part of that, and what I'm hearing is some of their employers, especially being in Houston, there's a huge oil and gas, and they've been remote for 2 years now, and they just do not want to go back into the office, and they're calling them back in the office. And so there's a mass exodus of people who have transitioned their lifestyle to work remotely, and they just simply don't want the inflexibility of having to drive in and commute in a city where it takes an hour to get places. I do think it makes sense to post jobs. I don't think it's going to be your primary source of candidates or hires, but I think you will get hires from that. And I think it's a good tool to use for networking as well.
That's great. And I like the point you made about remote on both sides of the coin. It's opening up a new pool of people who are looking for those remote opportunities, even if they're in industries or positions they weren't in before. So I guess it's important, if your opportunity is going to be remote, it's important to highlight that, because you're going to attract a different potential employee that way. Great thoughts. Roland, did you want to say something?
I think at the end of the day, it's really a question of mindset. If you look at startups from an accounting standpoint, financial perspective, what is the essence of a subscription economy or a SaaS model? It's about variabilizing cost, making cost variable, reducing overhead, but having that flexibility to adapt to a changing environment. And similarly, the great resignation is about people feeling empowered by the choices they make and having that flexibility to take on different types of initiatives that enable them to gain and develop themselves and their skills. And it is, I think, with that mindset, we need to look at it from also the financial perspective to understand that as we move forward, I was discussing this with someone yesterday in London. I think we are moving towards an economy where the permanent job is completely going to disappear. I don't know whether that's 10 or 15 years from now, but I think that's where we're heading. And that means that I think what we have traditionally called soft skills, but rather human skills, people will really need to take on development of their proactivity, their communication skills, their relational skills, those core elements that enable them to do better sales, to be better team members.
It's
And
definitely, I think you're definitely on track there, Roland. It's definitely a different set of skills, and not everyone is comfortable working exclusively from home and not having that human interaction. So you're right.
yeah, it's
Things are definitely changing.
I think there are two elements there.
Yep.
One is the adaptability to change, and then the willingness to take on skills. I'm done. Back to
Yeah,
you
I,
guys.
I actually think you bring up a good point about the great resignation and people being empowered. I do think that the startup really does need to share their vision with the prospective employees. Even their BHAG needs to be around something that will make an impact or change the world in a better way. BHAG, big, hairy, audacious goal. I don't think it should be, hey, just to make me rich or make me $1 million. I think you need to set up something. In 10 years, Startup Club wants to help 10 million startups. That's a BHAG. And people will work for companies because they have that purpose. We had a gentleman on yesterday at another show, and he was talking about he couldn't afford to hire the people to really help him run his not for profit. But the reason people did work for him was because they felt like they were doing something good as well.
Yeah, having a purpose, that purpose is really important. People want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. Let's go to Tanya next. We still have a few people on stage we haven't heard from. Tanya, what are your thoughts on hiring the right people for your startup?
Hi, one of my thoughts is just making sure that you have clarity on the expectations of that particular candidate, the expectations on your mission, on what you're looking for when it comes to the different personalities that you need to hire in your organization. I feel like we should get away from the generic interview process. We should be making sure we're aligning our interview process with the particular positions and the candidates that we're looking for based on the personalities that are aligning with our mission for our startup companies. And also, I think that we need to get a better clarity on the initiative or the incentive for the individual that we're bringing into our organization. Is this position for long term, or are we offering the option of that particular individual learning and we training them, giving them necessary skills so they can either branch off and get into their own business or get into entrepreneurship or whatever the case may be, because those are going to be the same people that appreciate the fact that we took time to give them all the necessary training, the necessary tools, and the skill sets that they needed so that they can evolve. I just believe in the way culture and society is going. We should be having a revolving door process when it comes to the hiring process. That gives you an opportunity to create a pool of applicants, candidates, right? That way it keeps you in the mindset or keeps you where you can always have fresh talent. I think the way we used to do business when we hire a person and we expect them to work for 30 years, 15, 20 years, I think that is going to eventually dissolve. So I think we should be looking at it from the standpoint of making sure that at the beginning that the people that we're bringing in, we have diverse personalities to be able to adapt to the diverse change in our cultures and everything that's going on, but make sure that we have some incentive in place to make them want to stay with you if they decide to stay with you for 20 years, stay with you if they decide to stay with you for 2 years, where you giving them something of substance where they can branch off and refer new candidates back to your company. That's my take on it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think you're spot on, Tanya, as far as how things have changed. I remember I'm old enough when my grandfather came to this country from Germany as a young man and went to work for one company and literally stayed with that same company, his first job in the United States, for his entire career and retired there in his 70s. So that doesn't happen very much anymore. I don't know what the statistics are, but I'm sure the average duration of a job or the number of jobs someone will have during their career now is significantly different than it was even 15 or 20 years ago. So thanks for bringing that up.
It always throws me off when I see a resume with like 10 jobs and 6 months here, 6 months there. I always throw those out. I don't know if anyone on stage can comment on that. Am I just being biased, or does longevity in the past history make a difference here?
I have a comment about that. I don't know if I think Michelle was going to say something. So I think the average, I just looked it up, tenure for ages 24 through 34 is now 3.5 years. 65 and over, it's 10.3 years. I think definitely you should look and ask questions if someone's moving jobs every 6 months. I think that's a little bit too much movement. But you also need to ask very pertinent questions like, why are they moving? I've known people that have moved from contract to contract when we just talked about there not being necessarily a full-time market any longer. There are people who literally work their careers as contractors, and sometimes they're working for the same people, but they're just moving companies as the contracts move. So I think you just need to be cognizant, especially in this market, and really ask good questions about why they've made the moves and if it makes sense.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think that's a good point. Go ahead, Michelle.
yeah, I agree with what Veronica is saying. There is very much a generational thing going on for sure. I remember when I had my first jobs, which I was at my first job, believe it or not, for almost 20 years. And I was so upset when I was leaving because I thought, oh my gosh, that was a failure. Like I needed to find the perfect place that I could stay at forever. That's not the world we live in today. And so there's acquisitions, as Veronica said. There's a lot of extenuating circumstances, maybe not even extenuating, but I think it's more pressure. The way I look at it, more pressure on the employer. Are you providing a place for people to grow? And a lot of job movement happens because that's not happening. I think understanding what the prospect employee or who whatever it is wants is really key in terms of what you're looking for. If you want somebody to stay for 10 years, then maybe you're having that conversation and you're making sure that they are incented to stay. And it's not all about money. It's also about learning and opportunity from what I've experienced seeing with others as well as myself. So I don't think it's necessarily bad. Yes, I agree, Veronica. Yeah, we have to ask those questions. It could be an acquisition, it could be there's a family situation, whatever it is. Try to get to the crux of what are they really looking for. There's very few employers that really ask people that question. Back to you, Jeff.
Yeah, good point. Tanya, you were going to say something real quick?
Yes, I was just going to say that it's very
Can't hear you,
important.
Tanya.
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Yes.
It's very important that we, at the initial onset, that we ask those open-ended questions when it comes to what they see or where they see themselves. A lot of times in the interview process, because I've done this for almost 30 years, we tend to ask all the questions and we answer the questions for them. I have a 65-35% rule. 65% of the time, I'm going to be listening. 35% of the time, I'm going to let you talk. I'm not going to look at your resume because guess what? We can all go and create a healthy resume. But does that resume align up with your personality? Tell me a little bit about yourself without looking at your piece of paper. Tell me a little bit about where you see yourself when it comes to that. But you got to also understand that guess what? A lot of people leave corporations and companies because of poor customer care. And that's what I specialize in. You got to know how to treat people, how to make people feel a certain type of way. But if you don't know how to service yourself, you're not going to be expecting this person to succumb to the level of service that you give yourself, if that makes sense. So I think
Yeah,
we
Tanya,
definitely
sorry.
got to ask those open-ended questions, but we got to also zone in back to the human element of doing business and giving service. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Listening is a really key point that you mentioned, Tanya. And when I interview people, I often start by asking them first, do they have any questions for me? Because what they ask will tell me quite a bit about what research they've done about the company and where their mindset is. Michele?
Yeah, I know we're talking a lot about hiring, but just to pivot for a second, there's something to be said about retaining. And I think the same thing goes for retaining. Don't be afraid of the hard questions that your good employees are asking you. They're, trust me, most people do not want you to be mad at them as their boss, and they are asking the hard question that probably 80% or more of your employees are thinking. So it really behooves you to really like also pay a lot of attention and hear what your employees are saying. Those are reasons that people leave. Thank you.
Thanks, Michele. Let's go to equality next. Equality, what are your thoughts on this topic? Equality, if you're there, unmute yourself. Otherwise, we'll go on. Okay, let's go on to Bunmi. I hope I pronounced it
Ah,
correct.
sorry,
So
sorry.
Equality's back. Sorry, Bunmi, just pause a second. Go ahead, Equality.
Hi, sorry. I'm not trying to get hired, but I would like to ask a question of, in terms of startups, what the international community doing in helping the developing and underdeveloping women and girls in helping them to initiate a startup, because we have so many skills, we have resources. However, that's not the focus in the global aspect. So, in my aspect, or in my view, we should be concentrating in educating women and girls into economic sustainability and self sufficiency. Thank you.
Thank you, Equality. Of course, that's a very good point, and there are a lot of resources. And I think some of the things we've talked about today, and it's interesting because Clubhouse is a very global platform, and we talked about this notion of people working remotely. So there are opportunities now for startups to hire people all over the world in all other communities and from different backgrounds. So hopefully things will continue to improve in that regard.
And I
Thank
was
you
just
for your
going to also add,
contribution. Yeah.
Jeff, I was going to also add that we did a show 2 weeks ago on this hour, and it's on the website, www.startup.club. And we interviewed a lady up in Canada who was running a virtual incubator, and a gentleman down here in South Florida. And these services are free. And every community, every country has these free types of services that if you can get your startup into an incubator or an accelerator, that can significantly increase your chances of success. And that show is available on the podcast channel as well, if you're on your Spotify or Apple, from 2 weeks ago. But just to let you know about that.
Thank you, Colin, for reminding us of that. And let's go to Bunmi now. Bunmi, welcome.
Yeah, hi. Thank you, everyone. My name is Bumi. And so I just want to approach this issue from two perspectives. And my first would be based on how do you attract the right people? And one of the things that has been on my mind a lot lately is how very disruptive the work environment and generally the startup world has been. And I believe that the two critical things that startups need to start looking at, especially in the next 5 to 10 years, as Roland has said. One is the focus and the emphasis would probably um, be a little bit, there'll be a lot more emphasis around behavioral science and behavior as groups of people. So, what I mean by that is we're going to get to a stage where we would have start grouping people according to behavior types to determine what sort of roles they can fit in, what kind of people are we going to attract, and we're going to have to be proactive in that manner rather than build roles for people. We're going to start building people for roles. That's what I see happening very soon, because otherwise it's going to be a first mover advantage problem. And this is a very interesting thing because even technology itself has gone through that process. There was a time when technology was just simply about the architecture of it and the layout of it and what you had to offer, the functionality of it. But over time, roles like product management have shown how important user behavior science is very integral to think this. And I think that recruitment or hiring is going to go through that kind of evolution too very soon, where it would be really important to actually be able to classify people according to the personality types, according to the behavior, and be able to build communities around that to be able to attract the right kind of people, which leads me to the next thing, the second point I wanted to make. And it's the importance of community. Right now, I know we have very traditional models of hiring people and attracting people, but these days, and very soon, it's going to evolve into being hugely community centered. And these communities would have to carry on into the workplace as well. Workplaces that are not like fashioned and structured around communities, which is where Agile comes from anyway, they're going to struggle because, again, we're dealing with also a generational problem where people are the millennials and the Gen Z. They want to be part of communities, they want to have opportunities to speak. I see in the future a very proactive startup starting a Clubhouse or starting a Twitter space, and the hiring manager in the company is actually starting such things and actually speaking to people, and there's a community there, and the feeders of that would be that people would send him DMs and take interest and know a bit more about the job, and they would also be able to share the experience, and we would practically scrap off the entire formalized process of the paper application and the LinkedIn. So I see things becoming very disruptive. And I would like to encourage founders and CEOs to actually lean heavily into building communities and lean heavily into grouping roles according to using some measure of behavioral science to classify roles, because it's not all roles that you need people to be in the office full time, 24
Yeah.
hours, or even spend 5 years on. So those are the points that I would like to bring up.
Thank, thank you, Bunmi. It's really interesting, the whole sociological, behavioral science aspect to the workplace. In many respects, especially in the United States, the current workforce and the current work structure, the whole idea of the 40-hour week, 9 to 5, really stems from a history in factory work and has nothing to do with the way we live and behave today. So certainly it's taking a long time for things to shift, but they certainly seem to be shifting. So thank you for that contribution. Wayne, welcome.
Hello, how you doing? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir, we hear you.
Great. So my name is Wayne Stewart. I'm the owner and founder of Stewart Design Agency. We're a full-service digital marketing agency based out of Baltimore, Maryland. And we just started our business about 4 years ago, and I just hired my first 2 employees. And it is actually we got a lot of great responses off LinkedIn. Our social media manager that we actually found was just me. We were just on a blog together. She ended up working at an old job I used to work at years ago, and she now had her own social media company, and she manages our social media for us now. Our marketing assistant that she hires starts on Monday. Same thing. We found her through actually a Slack group that we're a part of, and she saw the listing on LinkedIn and applied, and she was really great. So those have just been some of the ways that we found some great candidates that are out there.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, sometimes the right person is right next to you and you don't realize it. Scott, you're our final commenter tonight, this afternoon. Thanks for joining us. What are your thoughts on the topic?
Yeah, thank you. It's more of a question. And maybe you've talked about it. It was on some of the attests, but some years ago, when I applied for a job, it was more of a personality test, and it was really good. It worked for me, and it probably worked for the employer. I forgot the name, but it asked like many questions and all that. And in the end, it proved that I probably was not a good fit for them, and it was a smaller company. And do you use those? Do you encourage using those? And again, for me, it worked because I was very curious and I learned a lot from it. But in the way things are and the way everyone's talking, it may be cumbersome and discourage people from using it. So again, it's more of a question. This is Scott. I'm done speaking.
Veronica, go ahead.
Thank you. So I do want to answer that. I have used behavioral assessments for all levels of organizations and lots of different kinds of organizations. I want to be clear about a couple things. One, you have to understand what your company culture is, especially if you're a startup, because part of what you should be doing is not only looking at the job description and what someone needs to have as far as skills to be effective in that job, but you also need to see how they're going to be a cultural fit for the organization. So there's just skills-based assessments where you're just looking at skills, and then there's behavioral-based assessments where you might look at traits and also look at maybe intelligence level too. I say it works if you're clear about what you're looking for and you have something to measure against. So for instance, I work for a small startup. They grew to about 200 or so employees, started with 20 or 30. What we did is we looked at high performers within the organization, and we had an IO psychologist come in and look at them and have them take the assessment first. And we used that to create a tool for the organization, and it became very effective. The second thing I want to really say is you don't really want to use an assessment to discount people. What you want to do is use that assessment, when I say assessment, a behavioral assessment to discount people. You want to use it to ask better questions in the interview process. So at some point, you use it to dive deeper to understand where they are and as far as that particular area, if there are concerns. I think the other thing that you just have to be clear about when it comes to assessments is sometimes candidates do find it a little overbearing to take. They might push back a little bit, but if you share the results with them, they tend to like it because it helps to reveal some of their skills, and they can use it for their next job, or they can use it if they're going to be working for you as well. So
Thank you.
Great feedback, Veronica. Thank you so much. We
Guys, can I
appreciate
just
you
chime
having.
in? Can I just chime in?
Yeah, real quick, but then I'm going to hand it off to Colin to wrap us up. But go ahead real quick. But I wanted to thank Veronica for sharing your insights as someone who's a professional in this space. We appreciate it.
no problem.
Okay, so my point is, I mean, I'm a student of diplomacy and international relations, and I'm African, I'm Muslim, I'm a black woman, migrant, and also a diaspora. However, when it comes to business and starting up, there's not really anybody that's given a chance like me. We're never really relatable to the international community. However, we are the first point of relatability. So, as a woman, Muslim, Black, from Africa, I should get hired for global issues that affect people like me. But in a startup, which I'm trying to do, I'm trying to be a practitioner, I don't really get a lot of options based on the fact that I'm not the Hannah or the Amy. However, I am the Amina, I am the Muslim black girl. So when it comes to startup, there is a lot of discrimination and also a lot of kind of invisibility in this. Yeah, thing.
Thank you for sharing that. I think, as we talked about, it's a valid point, but I think that hopefully there are more opportunities now than there have been in the past. And as Colin mentioned before, there are resources and organizations focused on the very issues you raised. But thank you for bringing it up here. Colin, I'm going to hand it back to you. We're at the top of the hour, and I'm going to have to go. But thanks, everyone, for a great discussion.
Yep, nothing motivates people more than success. Everyone wants to work for a successful company. Nobody wants to work for a sinking ship. Everybody does, everybody wants off that ship and it's sinking. So I think it is important for the entrepreneur to really try to share their vision and what the potential of that company can do. This was a great show. I know that I followed everybody on stage here because it was just awesome. It was unbelievable. Really appreciate all of the insight, and we demonstrated the power of Clubhouse and the community coming together at Startup Club. Feel free to follow anyone who you thought on stage would have helped you out or gave you some advice. Feel free to follow them. Sorry. Next week's show is going to be very interesting. We are running the Clubhouse creator author Gary Henderson. He's going to help us figure out how startups can benefit from Clubhouse. Now, believe it or not, that was our first episode. Today was our 46th episode. And going back to the same topic we did at our very first episode around Clubhouse on the Serial Entrepreneur Hour is very interesting. And now we've got an author who's really done a great job building a community here on Clubhouse. So that's Gary Henderson next week. Looking forward to that. This was a great show. If you aren't already doing so, please go to startup.club, sign up to that mailing list so you can know about the big speakers coming to Clubhouse. And we've got some very good speakers coming in March on this show and on other shows. Thank you very much. Bye for now.